once you begin your broadcast.
Here we have a word problem, still in Chapter 6, so it's still going to be a quadratic. It says solve the following problem using the formula d equals 16t squared. So it just straight up says use this formula. Now don't let the word problems intimidate you. The words are usually there just to tell you what do these two variables stand for. And here they say distance is d. The d represents distance above the ground. So how high is something? And t represents time. Then the question is, if Bob has a treehouse 35 feet above the ground, we're going to have to plug that in and use this equation, and we have to decide, is 35 a d value or a t? And clearly that is distance. If the treehouse is 35 feet above the ground, how long, so in other words, find the time, how long, solve for t, would it take a water balloon dropped to hit the ground? So we're going to solve this for t, and that will tell us how long it would take a water balloon to hit the ground. So I'm going to solve this like any other equation. Our goal is to figure out what does t equal, solve for t. So to get the t by itself, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. I'm going to divide by 16 first. And then I have t squared equals, I'm just going to leave this as a fraction. It's fine. It doesn't simplify. That way I don't have to round, and I'll get as close to the exact answer as I can. The last step to get rid of a square, the opposite of a square is a square root. That's why it's in the square root section, and it's right after the other square root problem. Squares and square roots cancel. And I'm going to need to put this into the calculator to see what the answer is. So type in the square root of 35 divided by 16, and I get 1.479. Now notice here, there is a plus or minus sign. There are two answers, but with word problems, we only use the positive answer because you cannot have negative time. If you drop a water balloon, it's going to hit the ground in a little over a second. Negative time would be time travel. We can't have negative answers. So here we use the positive answer. The other way we learn how to solve a quadratic is the quadratic formula. So you're going to need to have that one memorized. That's the negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. The great thing about this is it always works. If something doesn't factor, or you don't prefer to factor, this will solve any quadratic in the world. We need to pick out what is the a value, what's the b value, and what's the c value. You have to be careful, though. They're trying to trick you and get you to just pick 3, -7, and 3. That would be wrong, because just like factoring, you cannot begin until the equation is equal to 0. We need to get all of the terms on one side. So if I add the 7x and subtract the 3, then this will be equal to 0. So you have to be so careful, because just having those signs mixed up would ruin the whole problem. And you would do all of this work and get the wrong answer. So you must have it equal to 0, and then you can pick out a, b, and c. You just use the coefficients, not the x's. So I'm very carefully going to do the quadratic formula and plug these numbers in. We have negative, then plug in b. Or sometimes they say the opposite of b. We're going to end up just changing that sign. plus or minus the square root. YouTube has awesome videos. If you watch YouTube, some songs to help you memorize this. There's some cool stories. It's really good. Anyway, now we have b squared minus 4 times a times c. And that entire thing gets divided by 2a. So I like to look at this in 3 parts. We have our negative b, so it's going to be negative 7. I think the denominator is simple as well. 2 times 3 is 6. And then either by hand or in a calculator, I like to figure out everything inside the radical. So you could type this into the calculator. You have to use the parentheses. Or if you're doing it by hand, 7 squared is 49. And when you multiply all of these together, negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, times negative 3 is positive 36. And then if I add those together, I get 85. If you can simplify 85, you absolutely would. But on this, when I tried to do the prime factorization, I get 5 and 17, so I can't circle any groups of 2. This is my simplified answer. Nothing else can be done. These are not like terms. And from here, you could put it into the calculator to get the decimal answers, but as far as doing it by hand, this is the complete simplified form. A soccer ball is kicked in the air. So if you are kicking a soccer ball, it would look like this. Ta-da! Goes up, comes back down, and it makes a parabola. And that's why the equation is a quadratic. Here they tell us h, you can find the height of the ball using this formula. So h stands for height, and t is time in seconds. When will the ball reach 32 feet? So again, they gave us 32 feet, and you have to decide where to plug that into this equation. This is the height. So I'm going to plug in 32 for h. The question says when. When will it be 32 feet high? When means find the time. How many seconds for the ball to get up to 32 feet? So here I plugged in 32, and now we need to solve this. Again, your first step is we have to have this equal to 0. Once I subtract 32 from both sides, now I have all of the terms on one side, and I'm going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula to solve. So A is negative 16, B is 56, and C is negative 32. So double check the signs, make sure you've got a negative, positive, negative. The quadratic formula is x equals, but this time since they're using a t, I'm going to use a t. So I'm just going to use the same variable as them. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. Use parentheses whenever you plug a number in, and if using a calculator, type in those parentheses. All divided by 2 times a. So here we've got negative 56 plus or minus the square root. I like to fill in the denominator because that's the other simpler part. And then in my calculator, I'm going to type in this entire inside, I'm going to type in everything underneath the radical. 56 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times negative 32. And I get 1,088. Now from here, I want to solve for time. Since this is a word problem, I have no idea what this number is. This doesn't make any sense. It's not helpful. So we're going to go ahead and type this into the calculator. I'm going to use the plus sign to get one answer. So I'm going to type this into the calculator. When using the calculator, make sure you put parentheses around the numerator, or else type the numerator in first and then hit enter before you divide, because we have to divide the entire thing by negative 32. To get the other answer, because quadratics have two answers, we'll use the minus sign. And again, if doing this in a calculator, you want to either put parentheses around the numerator or type all of that in first to make sure you get the right answer. So when you enter these in, I get 0.72 and 2.78. We get two answers. Since both answers are positive, that's awesome. We use both of them. If we had a negative answer, I would cross it out. You can't have negative time. So if you kick a soccer ball, perhaps if this is 32 feet high, it would hit 32 feet here, and then on the way back down it hits again. So there are two different times when the soccer ball is 32 feet high.